Welcome to this video, Studying for Math Exams, the what, where, when, and why of it all. This video will discuss why to study, when to study, how to study, and what to study. So take a minute, pause this video, and just reflect to yourself, why are you studying for this exam? If you're studying just to get by, just to pass, or to remember the information just long enough to pass the exam, you might struggle with following this prescriptive video. Now, remember, it's okay to just pass the course, but at some point that's going to catch up with you. A better motivation is to study in order to master the concepts and course materials and to keep the information in your long-term memory. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why do I need it in my long-term memory? And the truth is that math builds on itself. If you create for yourself a weak foundation, at some point the whole building will crumble. So think about this exam. If it's just a unit exam and you just get maybe barely a C, let's just say you get a 70%, are you going to remember that material when it comes to the final exam, which is cumulative? You might not. So think about that and try to make your goal, rather than just getting by, to really master the concepts, put them in your long-term memory so they stick around at least long enough to pass the final exam. All right, let's talk about when to study. I strongly recommend beginning your studying at least a week before the exam. And this is because, again, slow and steady wins the race. You want to keep your study session short, preferably 60 minutes or less. A good metaphor for studying is working out. So if you're into working out, sometimes people will just isolate one muscle group, right? Like let's say you're doing a leg day, okay? So if you work your legs continuously for a whole hour, right, chances are they're going to be really, really worn out. So the same is true of your brain and your cognition, right? At some point, even if you try to keep working problems or keep studying, it's going to have diminishing returns. So you really want to minimize, you want to keep your study sessions shorter rather than longer, and just try to study every day. Research, there's plenty of research that shows that cramming does not work. Not only is it ineffective at helping you remember information, but it also adds just a heap of anxiety and stress that is just counterproductive and actually might end up making you do worse on the exam rather than better. Again, slow and steady wins the race. We want to study a little bit every day so that we can do well on this exam. How to study: passive versus active studying. So take a minute, pause this video, and jot down, or just think to yourself, how you have studied for math exams in the past. Like, what did you do? Then unpause this video and continue. Passive studying. So passive studying looks like looking over your notes or your homework or your textbook, literally just looking at the material. Or it could be rewatching or watching in a video, or it could just be, if your instructor has a review session, going to that review session and watching the instructor rework problems. So think about this again, back to our metaphor of working out. If I watch a workout video to, I don't know, let's say somebody is doing a bench press, right? That bench press video might help me to learn the correct form. But I think we can all agree that my muscles are not going to get any stronger while I'm watching the video, right? Or let's say I go to a workout class, but instead of working out with the rest of the class, I just sit in the back and watch everybody. Right, that's great, but again, maybe I'm learning something about form or technique or something, but at the end of the day, I'm not getting any stronger. My physical fitness is not improving unless I join the class, okay? So again, you have to participate. So all of this passive studying is not effective. So in the past, if you studied for hours and that studying was, again, absorbing information by just looking at things, rereading things or rewatching things, that's probably why that method of studying was ineffective, because passive studying just doesn't work any more than me watching somebody do push-ups is going to make me stronger. So we need to talk about active studying. This is literally putting pencil to a paper. You need to work the problems on your own. And you need to practice recall, meaning as you work the problems, you're not working the problems that your teacher is working at the same time, or that somebody in a video is working, or even copying a problem from a book or from a previous assignment, right? You need to do it just pulling information from your brain and recalling what you need to do to solve that problem. So again, active study must involve the process of recall. You have to ask your brain to retrieve the information without any help, without any support, because that's exactly what you're going to be doing on the exam. Have you ever said one of these two things to yourself? Everything makes so much sense in the lecture, then when I get home, I struggle with the homework. Or have you ever said to yourself, I do so well in the homework, I just don't understand why I don't perform equally well on the exams? Well, let's pause and reflect on the differences between lecture and homework and exams. So here's our process of learning. So we start with a lecture. In a lecture, someone else works the problem, and the student ideally copies that problem and maybe asks a few questions. So in the lecture, you have an expert demonstrating some technique. So just aside here, one of my favorite hobbies is rock climbing, and I like to watch YouTube videos and I watch other people climb. And golly day, when I watch some of these guys climb, they make it look so easy, you know? Or even sometimes I'm at the gym and I'll be climbing with a more experienced climber and I watch them go up this route and they just make it look so easy. And then there I am on the wall and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. How did they make it look so easy? Well, the answer is pretty simple, right? They're stronger than me. They've been climbing for longer than me. So of course, in a lecture, everything is going to feel easy and simple, right? Because somebody is helping you up that wall. Somebody is walking you through it. Of course, you would hope that the person teaching your class is better at whatever the content is than you are because they are the expert. So it's a very common experience inside and outside of the classroom that the expert is going to make it look easy, right? Think about watching the Olympics or watching any sports on TV, right? Those people are experts in whatever sport they're competing in, so of course they make it look easy. If you and I went out to a gymnast mat and tried to do a bunch of back flips, we would not make it look easy. It would be ridiculous. Okay, so that's the lecture portion. So let's compare lecture with homework. So in homework, now, presumably, there is no expert there, right? So the student is working by themselves. Hopefully they have notes to help them, right? So hopefully they have access to these resources such as their notes, some practice problems they did in class, and so on and so forth. Okay, they should have unlimited time, right? With homework, that obviously there's a due date at some point, but it's not like you have 10 minutes to do 10 problems, right? You can take as much time as you want until the due date. And then the other thing to remember about homework is usually you only do like one section or one topic at a time. So it's important to realize that you're working the same type or maybe 2 or 3 types of problems over and over again. There's not a huge breadth of or variety of problems in a single homework assignment unless that homework is a review. So now let's compare our homework with our exam, okay? So when we get from the homework to the exam, now all of a sudden, right, instead of just doing, for example, quadratic equations, we're not doing them a bunch, right? Now we have a whole different, a whole selection of topics. And we have to figure out, before I can even start a problem, I have to figure out, gee golly, what kind of problem is this? How do I start this problem? Right? I'm not doing 20 of the same problem, I'm doing 10 different problems. And that in itself is a skill that I may or may not have practiced before I studied. Okay? Additionally, I don't have notes. I don't have my professor walking around to, nudge me in the right direction or remind me to watch my signs. I have nothing, right? And on top of that, I have limited time. So hopefully this diagram helps you understand why you might understand something really well in lecture and then struggle in the homework, or right? You might do really, really well in the homework when you're doing 20 of the same problem, you don't have any time and you can look at your notes, and then struggle in an exam where you're doing many types of problems, you don't have any notes or help, and you have limited time. Okay? So again, we're going to keep talking about this difference and we're going to work towards doing well, not just in our homework, not just in lecture, but also in the exam. Studying then should address the 3 major differences between homework and exams. So again, to summarize, right? One is the breadth of the material. Exams tend to cover a much broader selection of material than a homework assignment would. The second thing is there's no notes, no help, no support. You might get lucky one of these days and have a professor, who answers your questions during the exams. But for me, I find myself many, many, many times during the exam reminding my students, I can't tell you, I can't help you. You should know that, right? I don't like saying those things, but that's the purpose of the exam. The purpose of the exam is you sit down, you do a data dump, you tell me what you know. It's not time for me to tell you what I know anymore. It's time for you to show me what you know. Okay? And then, of course, the time limit. So again, those are the 3 things that we really need to hone in on and zero in on in order to do well on exams. In other words, to be properly prepared for an exam, you must be able to identify what type of problem you're being given and what you must do. Again, this is a skill not necessarily learned on a homework assignment, because in a homework assignment, maybe they're all using just that single skill. They're not putting all the things together in a bag, mixing them up, and pulling out a random problem, right? So that's a skill that we have to add to our repertoire. Secondly, we have to be able to complete each problem correctly the first time. So again, remember on that homework, whether it's online or written homework, right? You have many attempts, right? You can make mistakes, and you don't have that opportunity on an exam. You might be able to go back and spend extra time on a problem and change your answer, but ultimately you just have one attempt. And lastly, we have this time limit, which is not seen on a homework assignment. You might have quizzes where you have some time limits, but on a homework assignment, we don't see that time limit enforced. So to summarize what we've talked about so far in this video, we've talked about why to study, which is hopefully to achieve mastery and long-term memory, so at least we can pass that cumulative final exam, right? When to study, we want to do slow and steady, so a little bit each day, so we don't completely exhaust ourselves, and we know that cramming does not work. And how to study, right? We want to make sure we're using active studying, not just passively watching a video or rereading or looking at our notes. We're actually working the problems ourselves, and we're forcing our brain to recall information, right? We're not just looking at our notes and doing a monkey see, monkey do. So now we need to talk about what to study. Becoming an exam-ready student. So a beginner in any subject area will probably take multiple attempts to achieve the correct answer, the correct result. A beginner will not necessarily be able to work within a time limit and will need help, either in the form of notes or another human being guiding them through the process, right? So this is what a beginner looks like when they're first learning the material. Okay, when you are ready for the exam, you need to be able to get the correct answer in a single attempt within a time limit and without any help, meaning no other human being is helping you, no other student, right? No professor, and also you don't have any notes or anything like that. So that's all well and good, but the question is, right, what's happening between these beginner and exam ready? How do we get from where we are when we're first learning the material to being absolutely exam ready and being confident that when we walk into the exam, we're going to pass? What does that transformation look like? So before we can answer that question, we need to discuss the topic of metacognition. If you've never heard this word before, it simply means knowing what you know. So when you go to the doctor's office, they don't randomly prescribe you medicine, right? What do? They prescribe you medicine or treatment based on your symptoms, right? So they might, listen to your chest, right? Listen to your heart, listen to your breathing. They look in your eyes and your ears. They do all of this physical examination. They might do a blood test. They ask you about how you've been feeling. They collect all this information right before they do anything at all, don't they? Okay, so that's exactly what we want to do. We want to collect information and we want to study smarter, not harder. Okay? In other words, instead of studying every topic or everything equally, we're going to use metacognition to write ourselves a prescription for studying. So put simply, metacognition is being aware of what you know or what you don't know. An easy way to know your strengths and weaknesses for a unit exam is to simply look at your past homework and quiz grades. Your lowest grades indicate areas of weakness and are therefore deserving of greater time and attention. Where to start? When studying, many students begin by studying the exam review. However, I would strongly suggest that this is actually the last thing, not the first thing, that you should do. We will use the exam review as a practice test to make sure we have mastered all the exam material. But first, we must master each topic individually. For this, we will use the homework and quizzes. Step 1, homework and quizzes. Begin by collecting all of your graded homework and quizzes from the content that will be covered on the exam. Make sure that you're not collecting topics that are outside of the scope of the exam, because you don't necessarily want to spend time on those, and make sure you have all of the assignments that do relate to or that will be on the exam. So I want you to take those homework and quizzes, and you can mix them all together, but you want to put them in order from the lowest grade to the highest. So you want to start with the lowest grades, right, because those, again, are your weakest points, your weakest areas, and you want to rework those problems on blank paper. So as you do this, you want to make careful notes of the mistakes you made when you did that assignment, so that you do not repeat them, right? Learn from your mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but hopefully, right, some of us, we learn from them, and then we're like, okay, I see what I did. I dropped the negative sign, whatever it is, right? So we don't repeat them on the exam. So then you want to not just fix these, but you need to check them, right? So we're self-grading here. So make sure you're using the Post-it solutions, or if it's online homework, whatever that online tool is, make sure you're checking your work and obtaining the correct answers. As you work through these assignments, make sure you are able to complete the problems without notes or other aids or help, and correctly on the first attempt. It may not be necessary for you to rework every single homework and every single quiz question in order to study and prepare for the exam. Instead, after you have completed 2 or 3 similar problems correctly on the first attempt without any notes or help, you can move on to the next topic or assignment. Step 2, practice test. Now that you have reviewed all the course material using previous assignments, it's time to recreate the testing conditions. First, find a quiet location where you will not be disturbed for the duration of the test. Set a timer for the length of the exam. Your instructor should let you know how long you're going to have for the exam. Put away all materials except for those that will be allowed on the exam, and complete the exam review as a practice exam. Now, you're going to grade your practice test. Self-grade your exam review. How did you do? Make a note of any problems you missed or mistakes you made. Go back and work more problems on any topics you missed. Create a new practice test for yourself by finding problems similar to those on the first exam review. Rinse and repeat. So in summary, your grade on the exam should not be a surprise. Instead, it will be the result of your hard work and diligent studying. So take for a minute an Olympic athlete, right? So probably, chances are, they are not very surprised about their performance, right? So think about a gymnast, right? They know their routine. How do they practice for their routine? They do it over and over and over again. Repetition is the key to their success, right? Think of a runner, whether it's a long distance or short distance runner. How do they know that they're, is it a huge surprise when they see their end time for the race? No, right? Because they run the same race over and over and over again, and they have a very clear idea of how fast they can run, right? It's not surprising to them. So it should be the same thing to you. It's not a mystery thing. It's not luck. It's not magic. It's just the result of your hard work. And if you follow this procedure and you keep making practice exams for yourself, right, then you're not going to be very surprised about what you get right or what you get wrong in the exam, because you will have studied enough and done enough practice problems to know exactly where your strengths and weaknesses work. And again, that's the importance of metacognition. So by following this procedure, you can be assured of the grade you desire. Second, hopefully you can see, much like the athletes I was talking about, like an Olympic athlete or somebody training for some sort of race or run, right? Time is their biggest limitation. So same thing with you. And again, cramming does not work. You can try it. You can try staying up all night the night before the exam, but again, it's actually going to work against you. You'd probably be better off just not studying at all and getting a good night's sleep. Okay, so instead, right, slow and steady wins the race. Create a detailed study plan for yourself and stick to it.